Hey, good morning, guys. Thought I'd jump on here and do a live right quick. Show y'all the baits and kind of talk about the techniques I used at Grand Lake this last week to finish 12th in a tournament. I thought I could do a little better than that, but as it turned out, I really wanted a top 10. Obviously, I went up there to win the tournament, but I never really got on the bite that I felt like could win the tournament. So the second thing I had to think about was that I was 1 point out of the championship. So I wanted to make sure that I could catch enough to make the championship, which turns out they announced it's on Nickajack Lake in Tennessee, which is pretty cool. Never been there. Don't know much about it. But we're going to go there and give it a shot because we actually wound up, inside the top 25 after the tournament was over. And I pretty much suspected that I would be there. But anyway, let's get into what I used to get the 12th place finish. And, we had opportunity to do better than that. We probably should have been in the top 5. But let a lot of fish get off. Didn't fish real clean. It's hard to fish clean when you're throwing a jerk bait. But the really big fish didn't bite the jerk bait. They got a few bites on day 2 on the jig that I'm about to show you here in a minute that were rather large. I mean, 6 pounds plus. And had I had those couple of fish, things would have been, I still wouldn't have won the tournament, but I would have been up there in the top 5 or 6 for sure. Anyway, let's get to it. What I caught most of my fish on is this guy right here, a Sprobmic stick. So, kind of see the coloration of it, grayish colored back, little yellow stripe along the side, but the bait's kind of translucent. The fish didn't want a real shiny type bait. They just didn't want it. I get bit on it, but I didn't get many bites on it. But this dude right here, I don't know if you can see very well, but you see all the teeth marks and scratches on the thing. I probably caught 100 fish on this bait over 3 days. At least that many. I mean, I was catching them right and left. So the fish were positioned mostly over 30 to 60, even 80 feet of water. I know that's hard to believe, but that's where they were laying. And they were laying out under the docks that were sitting over that deep water and primarily feeding on shad, of course, what they do this time of year. But more often than not, the bass were located around the wave breakers out in front of the marinas out there in that open water. And I was targeting the ends of them, which seemed to be where I was getting most of the bites and the bigger bites. It was around the ends of them. You see me catch some fish on live in a shallow pocket back on there's a little rocky ridge that run across that cove. And it's only about 2.5, 3 feet on top of that ridge. Fell off to 10 foot on both sides. Just one of those kind of places that are really good, especially in the fall when fish get feeding up. So this was my main bait, especially for day 1. I used it all 3 days, but primarily day 1 I did most of the damage on it. Day 2, this little green pumpkin ball head jig right here. You can see some of the paint seed off the head. I make this jig myself. So, I poured these up last week before, the week before we went to Grand. I make the skirts. This is a little Zoom Ultravive Speed Crawl that I run on the back of. It's a good combination, 5/16 ounce. Flip this thing around the docks, the shallower docks, the ends and the corners, and out around the little gates out on the ends. I caught a lot of fish on this bait. But on day 2 is when they really, this jig excelled over everything else that I was fishing with, right? So I did get a bite on this bait pretty early Friday morning. That, you know, I kind of got carried away. I'm pitching this thing on, you can see the line's pretty small. I actually upsized it for the last day. But I was fishing this jig on 12-pound test, flipping around docks and all that. And that worked fine for the most part until a big fish bit. And instead of leaning into the fish, if you can see, let me get it up here. This jig's got a little light wire Gamakatsu hook in it. Very light. All you really got to do is lean into the fish. Well, you know, I got that bite and I wasn't thinking, and using a medium heavy action 7'3" rod, I laid the meat to the fish and snap, you know, broke off on a hook set. So day 3, I couldn't get them to bite the brown jig. So I fished it a long time, couldn't get them to bite it. So again, I make this jig too, and this is a black jig, so straight black. Little ball head jig, 7/16 ounce, this one is. And I would pitch it in the same places around the shallow ends of the docks, back around the walkways, and particularly anywhere that had little bushes growing on it, little growth growing on the docks. They would eat it up. So I caught a limit on this black jig right here. And then there was a small limit. I probably had about 8 pounds with that limit. And then, you know, later in the day on Saturday, I went back up to the mid-lake. I said, you know, told myself I got to have some bigger fish to get where I want to go. So I went back up the mid-lake and fished a few places. It wasn't happening. And I went to some docks and just kind of settled down and pitched around those docks. And green pumpkin, Zoom brush hogs, what did it. I caught 3 fish late in the day to, you know, bring my limit up. I had 10 pounds, 10 ounces. Should have been much better than that. But anyway, it is what it is. We wound up in 12th place. You can see that I dipped the tails, a little bit of the tail chartreuse, trying to kind of mimic a bluegill. The water up there was pretty heavily stained. That's a 5/0 Gamakatsu offset shank hooks, what I always use in a brush hog, and it works very well. 1/2 ounce Wu tungsten weight with a little pegger here. You know, peg the weight down so the weight doesn't separate from the bait, and I can get it in around the cables and stuff, which turns out that's where the fish were. So, you know, caught a good 3-pounder over the cables, a good 20-pound test, you know, Seaguar line. I was able to pull those fish over the cables. Caught one from the backside of a dock and pulled it over the dock and put it in the boat, and kind of the rest is history. But anyway, we finished 12th. We qualified for the championship on Nickajack, which was my main goal, was getting qualified for that championship. The secondary goal obviously was to at least get a top 10 in this event. I wasn't able to do that. We missed it by just a little bit, so we finished 12th. And obviously I went there to win the tournament, but in the 3 days of practice, I just never got on the kind of bite where I felt I could win. So what I did was I said, well, you know, having a limit each day is going to be, you know, a priority. And that's what led me to throwing the mixed stick around the docks and the wave breakers. I knew I could catch a limit of fish on that. They wouldn't be big, but I knew I could get a limit each day. Any kind of a limit on Grand in the fall is usually pretty good. So that's how the tournament went for me. And I shared my baits. These are exactly the baits I used. I just went out and cut them off my rods a while ago to bring them in and talk about them. So anyway, black jig, brown jig, you know, staples for me on Grand. They always pretty much work. But yeah, you don't want You don't want to be fishing with 10 or 12 pound tests and crack into the fish like you're fishing with 20 pound tests. That just don't work. So anyway, we're qualified and we're doing some research now about Nickajack, trying to figure out how we're going to, mainly kind of trying to figure out where we're going to stay up there for the week. And then secondary to that, we'll do a little research on the lake. I'll study some maps and whatever, and we'll try to come up with some kind of a game plan to start with, at least up there. But I do feel like the same baits I've shown here is probably going to excel there. The jerk bait, the finesse jigs, and possibly if there's grass, and I know there's grass. Depends on what the water temperature and everything is, but there may be a pretty strong frog bite or topwater bite. So that's always something you got to look at in the fall. Anyway, that's what did it for me, and hope y'all enjoyed seeing the baits and watching the tournament unfold. Me being on live day one was pretty cool. Hope I can do that again. Had a lot of fun with the camera in my boat. Could have had more fun, but I was trying to really, pretty much focusing on catching my fish and not so much enjoying the camera, which I did do that some, but when you're fishing a tournament and you want to do good, you kind of got to keep your head down and fish as hard as you can and just go and until you can't go no more, until the time is up. You can't give them anything. These guys in this league are top notch, super good. The league itself is better than any organization I think I've ever fished with, and I look forward to getting on this championship, and looking forward to 2022 and see if we can't do a little better in 2022. So I'm going to end the video now, and we'll talk to you later. If you got any questions on any of these baits, all you got to do is send me a message, and I'll tell you all you need to know, where to get them, how to rig them, what to do. And anyway, I hope you guys have a good day. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks. Bye-bye.